Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 3 of the CDL podcast. I'm your host, Ryan, and today we've got a lot of interesting stuff to get into about the league as a whole and my reactions to the Dallas homestand, the online Dallas homestand. So to start out today's podcast, I just want to give an apology for no pre-CDL Dallas home event prediction show or anything. With all the crazy stuff that has gone down since the last podcast with the coronavirus. The league was kind of in a flux, and we didn't really know what was going to happen with it. We all knew it would go online because, well, online isn't as good as LAN play. It is something that esports has the ability to do, is play online. So we knew it would transition to that. We just didn't know what the time frame was because obviously the CDL had a ton of work to do to get everything transitioned to online. This wasn't something they expected to happen in their first year or ever, most likely. So, yeah, I just wanted to apologize for no pre-CDL Dallas predictions, but it was just tough with the limited time frame and everything that's changed in my life with a busy schedule with school going online and everything as I'm a college student. But I didn't have time to get the predictions out because they announced that the weekend was happening so late, and it was just tough for me to get a podcast out. So I'm sorry about that, but in this one, we're going to get into our reactions and kind of my thoughts on the rest of the year. So I hope everybody is staying safe with the craziness of quarantine and social distancing and the coronavirus. It's an unprecedented time that I've never experienced anything like it. But I think we have to be thankful that we still have the CDL as fans of it. Obviously, I'm a big sports fan. I love the NBA, NFL, even the MLB, and all those, the NBA being postponed, the NFL possibly in jeopardy, and the MLB delayed. It's a really rough time for sports fans, and I mean, obviously a rough time for everybody in every aspect of their life, but specifically sports is also a tough time because there's nothing on to watch. And so for us that are esports fans as well as sports fans, we have a chance to still watch our favorite esports. So for people that aren't into esports, they have nothing. So hopefully they can get into them, and esports can get more viewership out of this if you want to look at some kind of positive that could possibly come from this horrible time. But I think we should just be thankful that we still have the CDL to view, so kind of put a positive spin on all this negative that's going on in the world. You should just be thankful that we at least have the CDL. I know online isn't as good as LAN, but we still do have something to watch at least. It's still content. It's still good Call of Duty, even if the servers are a little wacky, but we'll get into that. So first, I wanted to just do what we always do on our review podcast. This is the second review podcast, but I wanted to get into the matches from the weekend as a whole and talk about them, albeit online, but we'll just talk about the matches as a whole to start out. So I'm going to pull up the bracket here just to remind me of how the series played out maps wise. So in winners round 1, Group A, we don't want to go too much into the round 1 matchups. We had Toronto Ultra versus Florida Mutineers, and I know I didn't get into a prediction show, but I definitely would have gotten this one wrong had it been for me doing a prediction show. Because I would assume that I'm not super high on Florida as a team. I know they ended up winning the event. Spoiler alert if you didn't watch, but they ended up winning the event, but I would not have pegged them as like a top 4 team going into this, but I certainly would say they're better than Toronto Ultra, who I have towards my bottom, especially with their roster changes that they made. So I would have definitely got this one wrong, but Toronto Ultra was able to upset Florida. It seemed like Florida came out slow. They still have the new roster with Farrow replacing Pristini, which I was also shocked about, and we'll get into that later as well. I don't want to get into too much roster stuff. I just want to kind of go over the matches. So Toronto was able to pull out a shocker here and actually beat Florida 3-2, and Toronto was pretty impressive this weekend. I actually think that they played better than I thought they were, so better than I thought they were going to. So they were able to upset Florida here, knock them down to the losers knockout match. And then in our next match, in Group A, we had Dallas Empire versus LA Guerrillas. Empire handled them pretty easily, 3-1, and this should be no shocker to anyone who's been watching Call of Duty all year. Dallas Empire are a much better team than the LA Guerrillas, and they're also known for being an online connection-based team, so no shocker that they were able to take out the LA Guerrillas fairly quickly. And then going down into the first knockout match between the two teams that lost was Florida versus LA, and no shocker here, Florida was able to 3-1 the LA Guerrillas. Once again, LA Guerrillas, in my opinion, the worst team in the league. Don't think it's really that close. So they were able to 3-1 them pretty easily and knock LA Guerrillas out, and Florida moved on. So then getting into the qualifier match between the two winners in this bracket, this match was actually a shocker to me. It was the Toronto Ultra versus Dallas Empire. Anybody who's been watching COD this year would assume that the Dallas Empire would win this one pretty handily. Toronto Ultra would maybe get a map, but the Toronto Ultra actually took 2 maps off them. forced a game 5 in this series, which continued the trend on the weekend that I was pretty impressed by the Toronto Ultra, and maybe with this roster change, could see them maybe sneaking into the bottom of that 8 to 10 range and possibly being able to sneak out a wild card playoff spot. I wouldn't be shocked by that based on their performance this weekend. But Dallas Empire was able to take it 3-2, shake off some of their rusty start to the series and win it. So that sent Toronto Ultra down to the knockout match 2 versus the Florida Mutineers. And here Toronto's steam of 2 5-game series and looking pretty well kind of fizzled out, and Florida was able to handle them relatively easy with a 3-1. So Florida and Dallas made it out of Group A. And then in winners round 1, in the bottom of Group B, we had Surge versus Paris Legion. And once again, I was left kind of surprised by this match. I pretty much would have gotten everything right in Group A had I predicted it. I would have picked Florida and Dallas to come out. I forgot to mention that, but I wouldn't have predicted it to happen the way it did. I would have predicted Florida to beat Toronto originally, but those are the two teams I would have had coming out, so I would have gotten that right. But in Group B, I think I would have struggled a little bit more with the initial matches. I know Paris has looked better than Seattle all year. Paris has been the better team. They probably still are the better team, but just something about that Octane, the best AR in the game in my opinion. I used to think it was Formal for a while, but these last 2 years Octane has shown he is undisputedly the best AR in the game. And I figured with Karma and Apathy and Octane, and I know they have Pander now, but I figured with that veteran team and so many all-time great players with rings, I figured they'd eventually be able to take out a team with lower tier players you would assume in Paris. But nope, Paris was able to get it done again. Seattle just could not get their game 5 once again, like they never can. They can never win a game 5. So they were able to fall to Paris Legion 3-2. Paris moved on. I probably would have gotten that one wrong, although I know that would have been like a flyer pick because Paris would be the smart pick there. And then the other match, Chicago, Minnesota, arguably the two best teams that were in the tournament this weekend. I mean, obviously Dallas is up there too, but Chicago, Dallas, Minnesota are probably the top 3 teams going into this. And Chicago and Minnesota had to play in the first round, and Chicago swiftly 3-0'd them, which was a bit of a shocker to me because this match really could have gone either way. I remember that game 1 hardpoint, Minnesota actually hopped in the hill and had a hold with they were at about 235, and they could have held the rest of that hill on Ramaza, and they were not able to do so. And Chicago won a very close match that Minnesota could have easily won. And then the search and destroy was a 5-0 lead for Minnesota, in which Chicago pulled the full sail on them. I believe it's only the 3rd full sail ever to happen in competitive Call of Duty, so that was a bit of a shocker. And then they were able to handle the Dom. I believe that was a fairly close match too, but they 3-0'd them, which is a bit of a shocker. I would have picked Chicago to win this match, but I would not have thought it would be in a 3-0 fashion. And then our knockout match 1, we had Seattle Surge versus Minnesota Rocker. The Rocker were able to handle this one fairly easily. Or no, this was the match. I'm sorry, this was not a very easy match. This was the match that was, I believe, the 6-gamer. I think that they had that tie in the Dom, and it was an absolutely insane match. And then, of course, Seattle went down and ended up blowing the Search 6-2 in Game 5 like they always do. They can't play a good Search. But I believe the Game 4 hardpoint was a 250 to 249. And that Dom tied, and the Searches weren't that close. But, I mean, the series was overall crazy, and Seattle was just not able to get it done in a Game 5 again. So Minnesota moved on. And then Paris, Chicago. Obviously, I would pick Chicago on this one. I'm pretty high on that team, and they were able to handle them pretty easily and move on. And then in the knockout match 2, Paris versus Minnesota. Minnesota was able to 3-1 Paris, like you'd expect, although Paris is a solid team. Minnesota is better. So in a roundabout way, and I wouldn't have picked it this way, the 4 teams I would expect to come out, Dallas, Minnesota, Chicago, and Florida, were able to get out. So this does show a little bit that while online is a little fluky, the results still should stay somewhat close to LAN, because, I mean, the 4 teams you expect to get out, and although maybe the teams you didn't expect to make the final made it, at least it was somewhat close, and the teams that you expected to make it out of groups made it out, so which kind of shows the accuracy of online. Obviously, it's not nearly as accurate, but at least the results were close to what we expect on LAN. And then the semifinals, we had the Minnesota Rocker versus Dallas Empire. Rocker were able to take them out 3-1. And this might come as a shocker to a lot of you, especially because Dallas is known as a very good online team. But I believe in my last podcast, I actually put the Rocker ahead of the Dallas Empire in my power rankings because I think that, frankly, they're a better team. They might not be a better team online, unfortunately, as the rest of the season goes on, but on land, I think they're a better team, and they were able to take out Dallas, which came as a shocker to many people. The defending champs went down in the semifinal. And then much more of a shocker of a match in the other one. In a 3-1, Florida took out Chicago. Chicago started out hot in that game one, and I think they actually smoked. It was like a 250-159 match or something. I might be completely wrong on that, but I believe that's what it was. And Chicago was able to smoke them in map one. And then Florida just rattled off 3 straight, and Chicago seemed to have some turmoil within the team after, with a lot of people being upset on Twitter, but we'll get into that later. And Florida was able to take that 3-1. So it was a Florida-Minnesota final, just like everybody predicted, right? Probably not. If you predicted that, I mean, it's not an absolutely... There's a lot crazier predictions you could have made. Those are probably the 3rd and 4th best team. Maybe Paris could be up there ahead of one of those 2 teams. But those are probably like roughly around the 3 to 5 range out of the 8 teams that were there. So it's not crazy unrealistic, but... It'd be kind of a bold prediction if you predicted this, especially if you predicted Florida to win. So Florida was able to win this match. Havoc had a great weekend. Pharaoh really impressed me. I've always been pretty high on Pharaoh as a player, but he really impressed me. And Florida was able to get the win this weekend, which I'm sure nobody really predicted. So then after that, I would like to quickly get into the power rankings. I know I'm kind of going through this fast, but... there wasn't a ton to talk about this weekend in terms of gameplay. I kind of wanted to get into my new power ranking since it's been a few weeks, and I wanted to talk about some of my like rumors I've heard and big takeaways and predictions for the year, and just give you a little bit of a shorter podcast because the review podcasts are generally shorter than when we make predictions, because predictions is a little more to talk about, a little more upcoming. This, you've all watched it, you've seen it, that's why you're watching the podcast. So I think we're going to keep this one a little bit shorter. And next we're going to get into the power rankings following this weekend and looking forward a little bit into online. So starting off with my power rankings, I still have to go 1 Atlanta FaZe. I know they didn't play this weekend, but they're known, Simp and Beezy, Major Maniac, all of them, Celium, known to be great online players. I believe when this game first came out, before any tournaments, or not when the game first came out, but over that first like month or so when teams were scrimming and before tournaments, I know Celium was known as the best online player. People were saying this guy's the best in the game, and Celium might be like the 3rd best player on that team behind Abizi and Simp, and you could even sometimes put him behind Major Maniac and Priesta. That's how amazing this team is. Any player could be their worst player at any given moment, and they're still probably a top 10 player. So I've got to put them at number 1, taking into account online and everything and how good of a team they are. They've still got to be number 1. Then at number 2, I have got the Dallas Empire, which might come as a little bit of a shock, especially because I'm a bit of a Huntsmen fan, but I'm taking into account the fact that we're assuming the rest of the season is to be played online, and I think Dallas Empire, even on LAN, is a top 3. If they're not top 3, they're definitely top 4 with Minnesota and Chicago as well. But I think with the online factor, and I think Krim and Clay will stay very good online. Same with Hook. Those are 3 veterans of the community, 3 great players. But I also think that Ilya and Shotzi, without the lights on them on LAN, are much better online. And this team has been to every single final leading up to this event. They were in every final that they attended. And then this event, they were in the semifinals. So they've never failed to make it out of groups, and they've been to almost every final. And now that they move online, I think they get better. And Chicago has struggled recently not making the final in the last 2 events, losing in the semifinal. So I have to put Dallas ahead of them for now, and this could very much change. So then number 3... I put the Chicago Huntsmen. I think they have to be 3 because I think online Dallas is better, but I don't think you can still make an argument despite Chicago losing the last 2 semifinals. I think you still have to put them with the talent on their team. Even though it appears some turmoil going on with the team, I think you still have to put them in the top 3. And then 4, I've got Rocker. I think that's pretty much everybody's top 4. Rocker are clearly a top 4 team. This weekend they made the final again and were able to come up short again, unfortunately. But they looked just as good online as they did on LAN. They struggled in their first match and got knocked to losers right away, but overall they looked really solid again. I think online in a weekend where FaZe or Chicago aren't in, if they have any more of those left, they could be able to win an event. I think they're consistently going to make it out of their group, though. I don't see a possible way they don't make it out of their group unless they are in one with like Empire and Huntsmen or Empire and FaZe. That's a possibility they don't make it out, but I don't see a way that Minnesota isn't consistently finishing top 4 for the rest of the year, so that's why I have them at 4 and not Florida. And then number 5, as you might have guessed from my last comment, is Florida. I had a tough time putting them up here because I think that OGLA and the London Royal Ravens are more talented and overall better teams, but OGLA has some weird stuff going on, and so does London. And Florida just won the event with some pretty good teams. I mean, 3 of my top 4 teams were present at this event, so Florida winning the event has to move them up to the top 5. Although the switch with Farrow in for Pristini and Pristini not subbing back in for Mox is a little odd, so I could very much see Florida moving down a couple spots and being passed by OGLA and London Royal Ravens, and I think this will happen within a few weeks. I think OGLA and London Royal Ravens will jump them, but for now they're in the 5. And then 6 is OGLA, which is a weird team right now because they might have a roster change going on, and we'll get into that a little later. And then 7 is the London Royal Ravens. They also had a roster change. I believe they dropped a rated for a player called Nasty, who I don't know much about. But as you know, I'm not a big rated fan. I don't think he's that great of a player in this game, and I don't think he fits the team well because Wuskin is one of the best main ARs, and Rated, who's typically a main AR, isn't able to use one. So I'm putting them at 7, but I think they have potential to really climb. If Nasty is a good player, I don't know a whole lot about him, so I can't really say, but if he's in a good aggressive sub, I think London could climb all the way up to 5 and pass Florida. And then 8, this might be a little disrespect, but I have the Paris Legion. They managed to win another match this weekend and get to the second stage, but they just don't. I just don't see them ever really getting out of their group too much. They don't seem to have too much top 4 potential ever since that first weekend. But to be fair to them, after 8, I think there is a pretty big cutoff. I think after 8, there's a big drop off. I think they're much further ahead of the 9. I think like 1, 2, and 3. Even 1 through 4 is kind of all on the same tier, and there's a slight drop off to Florida, OGLA, London Royal Ravens, and Paris are in their own tier, and then there's a big drop off to 9 through 12. So Paris is far ahead of number 9, who I'm going to have a Seattle Surge. Once again, they were able to get to a Game 5 in both series they played, and they lost the Game 5 Surge. They seem like a team that, if they could have a coach that could help them in Surge, or just could find a way to clutch up in Search more, or maybe make a roster change to get a player other than like Pander, because no player on that team is historically that good in Search. Apathy has his moments, Octane has his moments, Karma has his moments, but none of them are superstar Search players, and this is very evident with the fact that they can't win a Search. They get to a Game 5 by winning a hard point and a Dom or 2 hard points in every single series, and then get blown out in a Game 5 Search, winning 2 rounds. I think if they could fix their Search, they could go from 9 to all the way up to the 5 spot, because their respawn is on par with most teams. And then the bottom of the barrel, 10, Toronto Ultra. They actually impressed me this weekend, and I almost put them above Seattle because they were actually able to win searches. They're just a little bit worse in respawn than Seattle, but they could very easily jump. Seattle, if their roster change, dropping Looney, which was very weird, continues to be successful, they could jump up a little bit. They're the team with the most potential to move in the bottom 3. And then 11, I have the Subliners, because once again, I put them and the Gorillas are both equally horrible, but I think that the Subliners with Attach, Zuma, Temp, those kind of players, they have a little bit more ability to possibly move up, and with a new kid, Mac Melts, they might be a little better, who knows. But I think they have a little bit more potential to move up the list than the LA Gorillas. Vivid and Spart look okay. Blast is alright. I think Aqua's a really good player, but overall that team, Aqua and Decimate are good, but overall that team is bottom of the barrel, and I don't see them moving out of the 12 spot for the rest of the year unless they make drastic roster changes, which with the nature of the league being online now, I doubt will happen. So next, I want to get into some of the rumors that are kind of going around the community. These are not rumors that I'm breaking myself or anything by any means. I saw them from like the CDL Intel page and just some of the talks that seem to be going around the community and my own speculation. So I want to talk about my opinions on some of those. So the first one is Dashi being benched for Chino. I know Dashi moved back to Toronto. I believe that's where he's from. I know he's from Canada. I think he's from Toronto. That's where he went. I might be wrong on that. But he moved back. I'm assuming it was to be with family during this time. I know he recently moved out. He's only like a 19 or 20-year-old kid. So he moved back to be with family, so that's good for him. But it seems like the whole year Slasher and Dashi haven't gotten along. And maybe that came to a tipping point. It seems odd to me that JCap's been dropped by Slasher before, so I know he's willing to do it. It seemed to me that if it wasn't like a relationship thing where Slasher and Dashy couldn't fix the relationship, it seems to me that they should have dropped JCap because Chino has more gun skill than JCap, despite JCap's leadership. And Chino's by no means a dumb player. He definitely would be able to hold his own and like know what's going on. Maybe at the level JCap would, maybe not as good of a communicator, but you wouldn't lose that much in intelligence. It's not like you're going to a young 18-year-old just good gun. Chino's an intelligent player that's won events and been around for a while. So in my opinion, they should have just dropped JCap. And I mean, if they would have went forward with the team of Dashy, TJ, Slasher, Kenny, and Chino, the gun skill on that team would have been maybe the best in the league, up there with Atlanta. And with that much gun skill, maybe they could get over their relationship issues in the team and just completely destroy teams with gun skill and not even have to worry that much about rotations and everything. In a game like this, sometimes rotations don't matter as much with the weird spawns. And with that much gun skill, they could have just pushed their way through the fundamental play and maybe been a better team. But it seems like Dashy could have been benched for Chino, which might have a lot more implications in the league, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, I think Dashy being benched for Chino is a weird move. I don't think it's good for OGLA. I think it'll move him down my power rankings. Unless, like I said, the relationship was just so bad between Dashy and Slasher that they just couldn't continue to play. And then the roster chose to go with Slasher over Dashy. And this is by no means calling out Chino or anything. I think Chino's a great player. He's won championships with his new teammate, if he's a starter, Kenny. I think he's a great player. I think that Dashy's a generational talent, which is something that you just don't bench or just let go of this easily for somebody like Chino, who's a really good player, but not a generational talent by any means. And then the next point is Arcitys and the Chicago roster. There's no rumors that they're changing or anything. This is more me speculating. But Arcitys, I heard on the Eavesdrop podcast, was really upset not playing with Pristini anymore. He went into the year, he chose to not play with Pristini. I'm sure they could have stayed together if they wanted to. It's a good marketing tool, and they're both good players, world champs. But he was upset that he isn't playing with Pristini anymore. He said he misses that, and he doesn't think that they'll last not the whole year, but he doesn't think next year they'll be apart. He thinks they'll probably play together again. So I think he's almost had one foot out the door since the year started, and he kind of realized that he regrets not playing with Pristini. And after the match that they lost to get knocked out of the tournament, he was pretty vocal in voicing his frustrations on Twitter, saying they're not playing the game right. And I know Gunless, his best friend, is pretty hot-headed, and I'm sure he had a lot to say about it, with Formal being in California and his connection not being great. I'm sure they had a lot of arguing going on. So now with Arcitys really frustrated with the team, Gunless, Arcitys' best friend, I'm sure, was pretty hot-headed and frustrated with the team. And you've got Dashy likely sitting on the bench somewhere. You've got Pristini sitting on the bench somewhere. I just think that there's probably a pretty good likelihood that either Arcitys gets moved to play with Pristini somewhere, Gunless gets moved to bring in Dashy because Gunless has been upset, or both get moved, or Pristini gets brought on to Chicago in place of Gunless. I think Arcitys has been really upset not being able to play with Pristini, and I think that will lead to a roster change with Chicago somehow, whether it's Arcitys and Gunless leaving, one or the other leaving, Pristini coming in for somebody, Dashy coming in for Gunless, because I know Hex loves Dashy, Scump loves Dashy. I just think something on the Chicago roster is going to shift, and it might not be immediately, and it's obviously a pretty bold thing to say because Chicago is one of the best rosters in the game and could very easily stick it out. But I think that something is going to happen with the Chicago roster, and I think it's going to be a big shakeup. It's going to be a lot of superstar players in the move, whether it's Pristini coming in, Dashy coming in, or Arcitys and Gunless leaving. So the next thing is Pharaoh staying in place of Pristini and them not benching Mox. Now, obviously, this is probably going to stick for the rest of the year because Pharaoh and the Florida Mutineers were able to win the tournament, shockingly. And many people before the event were calling for the benching of Mox to bring Pristini back in, which is what everybody kind of thought was going to happen, including me. And I thought that's what should have happened. But now with the flukiness of online results, it seems that Florida will probably stick with their roster because they won an event. So, I mean, they'll at least probably stick with them for one or two more events. But I still think that it's kind of like when teams in the past have, like when LG won the event in BO4, with the Rampart and Classic playing well with the Rampart. It was pretty clear that Classic was pretty horrible at BO4 and he wasn't very good, and they needed to make a roster change. Even though they won the event, they probably should have dropped him for a better player that was on the market. I can't remember who was really out there at the time, but I know there were better players out there. It was pretty clear that they should have dropped Classic, picked up somebody that could actually use a SOG or a Maddox or something, and then improve their roster right away. But they got complacent because they won an event, and they ended up being horrible the next event or two with him, and then made a roster change, and it was too late for them to gel before Champs, and they ended up not getting a great placing at Champs. So I think Florida needs to look at this, and Mox is main AR. He's not able to play that Pristine. He's a better player in the role that they're playing. So I think they need to not get complacent and put in Pristine in place of Mox. And then the next thing I want to talk about was Looney being benched. I don't have a lot of information on this, but I know in that interview, I believe it was Cammy, was in an interview with Miles. And he basically said before the interview, when I don't think they were supposed to be on camera, like, you're not going to ask me any questions about Looney, right? Like, no questions about Looney, which is weird. It seems like Looney kind of got blackballed from the team almost. I don't know what's going on there. It seems really weird in a team full of young players and not like kind of lower tier players that you'd bench like the one decorated veteran with multiple championships and multiple games. But they almost looked better. So I wonder if that's something with Looney just isn't that great at this game, and the young players, I know he has kind of a reputation of being kind of like a general in game and maybe a little bit toxic, so maybe the young players just didn't get along with him well and didn't mesh with him well in game, and they're able to just run around a little more freely without him on the roster, and Methods maybe being the leader, so maybe that's why they play better. But it seems like Looney is on the bench to stay, although with Toronto, you never know, they really like to switch in and out their players a lot. And then the last thing, roster-wise, London made a switch to Nasty and dropped Rated. I heard that maybe they were scrimming with Shawnee too, so I don't know if maybe Shawnee's actually in instead of Rated. One of the two is. Obviously, we weren't able to see them this week because they were not involved in the Dallas homestand, but I think that this is a good switch, even if it's Shawnee or Rated, because Shawnee's a solid player, and I know he's a good player and can fill in the shoes of Rated and maybe play the sub role a little bit better than he did. And Nasty, I don't know anything about, so I can't really comment on that. But I think this is going to be a good switch. Like I said in my power rankings, I think that London is one of the highest potential teams. I can see them being a 10th rated team, or I can see them climbing their way into the top 4 by the end of the year. And I think this roster switch helps a lot because I know Rated just doesn't get along with the Marshall twins that great, specifically Scraps. And I think that maybe getting the vibes up with the team with Shawnee, who seems to really gel with Wuskin especially, and Dylan from last year, and then maybe making the switch to Nasty otherwise. I don't know. I'm assuming he's a pretty good player. I think he's a young European player that recently turned of age. I think just making the switch helps the vibes, gets rid of Rated and out of his weird role that he's really not meant to play. He's more of an AR. I think they're going to improve from that. So then to my 5 biggest takeaways. I kind of talked about the first one. I just want to talk about 5 like takeaways, predictions, thoughts on the CDL as a whole with the online league. The first one I kind of did talk about, the Dashy gunless trade. I still think it's going to happen this year, or Pristini will make his way to Chicago as Arcitys leaves. I kind of got into that earlier, so I won't get back into that. But I think some kind of roster change that's major is going to happen with Chicago within the next month or two. I think Dashy for gunless for Pristini, Arcitys straight up leaves the team. Benches himself, and General has to come in until they find somebody. Maybe Bowes will have to come in. That'll never happen, but I'd like to see it. Second prediction or takeaway, I think Shotzzy and Illy, this is kind of a bold prediction, I guess you could say, but I think Shotzzy and Illy are going to be in an MVP-like form now that the league is online, and possibly make Dallas the best team. I don't want to dethrone Atlanta because I still think they're by far the best team, but I think Krim and Clay and Hook are going to be good in whatever setting you put them in. Online, LAN, they're 3 veterans. Krim's the most winnings player. Clay is right up there with him, and Hook is one of the most talented players we've ever seen. So I think online or LAN, those 3 players are going to be some of the best in the game regardless. But Shotzzy and Illy struggled a little bit on LAN, and I know in the beginning of the year people were calling them like the best young duo in the game when they were online because they're both absolutely disgusting online. So I think that those 2 are going to be in an MVP-like form and could possibly make Dallas the best team because I expect Krim, Clay, Hook to keep doing their thing, and Shotzzy and Illy are absolutely gross online. So I think that that team could be the best in the league, and those two are going to be MVP like, maybe causing them to get huge contracts next year. And I think that might screw over some teams because I think Ilya and Shotzi are crazy good, but I think the lack of land practice they're about to get this year might delay their development a little bit. And then next year, when teams are expecting them to be superstars based on their online play throughout this year, I don't think they're going to be at that superstar level without the land experience, and I think that might cause a rude awakening for some teams. And I could very easily see Ilya and Shotzi team, if they're on the same team again next year, starting out very, very slow, assuming we're back to land. And then another thing I kind of touched on a little bit, my third point, is that London is going to improve drastically by dropping Rated, somebody who does not fit their playstyle. Rated's a slow main AR. And in some games, you maybe would put him in your main AR over Wuskin, because Wuskin has struggled in some games, but Wuskin is one of the best. He's probably a top 3 main AR. We haven't seen him in a while, but if he's not top 3, he's top 5. He's right up there. He's put up some of the best numbers statistically this year from the M4, the main AR role, not the flex, that he's been playing the last few years. But he looks amazing. Rated is obviously going to be the odd man out when it comes to main AR, because I think Scraps is kind of the guy on this team, and he's obviously going to choose his twin brother that he's very close with over Rated, leaving him out. But I think they're going to improve drastically, and I think we're going to see London at the next event come out and get a top 4 or higher finish and maybe finally make their first final. And the last 2 points are not really as much team related or player related or league, like they're more just like league related, and some of the things that I think as fans we kind of have to be conscious to over the rest of the year. For first, I know the broadcast had a lot of hiccups. There was some audio cutting each other out issues, there was audio delay issues, audio wasn't working, the stream was laggy. I think we have to cut them some slack a little bit on this. I mean, I know they play tested and stuff, but there's a difference between testing it and rolling it out to the real world. And I think that in this transition, some of the things they might not have accounted for, they just forgot. This is their first time doing this. But I think this weekend we realized that the CDL has the best talent group in casters in esports. And we've got to start respecting that. I think that between Maven and Merc, I think they're the best casting duo in esports. Before it probably was the trio of Courage, Mr. X, and Maven. But now I think Maven and Merc are probably the best duo in esports, if not they're right up there. And then you've got backup groups like Benson and Chance. I was not a big Chance fan at first, but he's absolutely right up there with the top casters. He's always provides great insight, and Benson for years has been one of the top play-by-play guys. And then the third duo, Miles and Momo. Momo's been around forever too. Miles is a little bit newer, but Momo is very, very good. He's got a good knowledge of the game, and Miles is becoming one of my favorite casters. Miles kind of reminds me of Courage, who was my favorite caster back when he was in the COD scene. Miles is really entertaining. He seems to know the game pretty well, and he's pretty willing to say some risky things on air, which goes a long way and usually adds to some of the comedy aspect of the broadcast, because after all, the whole broadcast, we're just having fun watching esports. I mean, he's a great announcer. I think overall those 3 duos, along with like Nameless on the desk, LVP's been impressing me on the desk. I didn't know how I would feel about her because I really liked Katie, but she's been doing an excellent job in her transition. And Rich Campbell, I wasn't a huge fan of him when he first came onto the scene, but he's provides a good change of pace. With Nameless is more serious and has the real knowledge, and LVP is a really good desk host, and then Rich kind of throws a curveball and adds some comedy to it while still seeming to know his stuff pretty well. So I think we just got to respect the talent group. They're one of the best in esports. They'll get it figured out, and I'm sure the broadcast will be a lot smoother next week. Just like I remember when I went to CDL Minnesota for the first weekend, the first actual game, the hard point between Chicago and Dallas, I believe it was absolutely horrible. 90% of the game we were watching in third person from overhead camera views. It was unwatchable. It was horrible. And then by the end of the event, it was a lot better. And down to the last LAN event, it was running just as smooth as it ever had. I think we just got to give them some time and they'll figure it out. And then the last thing is these 12 hertz servers. They need to go. Hopefully we can find a way to play on LAN by champs, whether it's finding a way to isolate everyone and just have the players in an arena playing with no fans, so that way the results can be more consistent. But these 12 hertz servers are horrible. I know Seattle was complaining about it a lot, and you don't want to just give everybody the benefit of the doubt and say, oh, whatever, it's online, it doesn't count at all, because Online or LAN, you still got to clutch up, make the plays, and the results held somewhat consistent. The top 4 teams that were there this weekend made it out, even though probably the 2 worst of the 4 ended up getting to the finals. The results are still pretty consistent, but the 12 hertz servers need to go. A standard on console is 60 hertz, so the fact that they're playing on 12 on supposedly dedicated servers is just awful. And I heard they weren't telling the players before the match, like if it was a match between the Gorillas and like Chicago, for example. Chicago players are based in I believe like the Dallas Fort Worth area, and then the LA players are based in LA. And if they were playing each other, you would figure that they'd have a server at some state kind of in between to try to make the connection even, but they weren't even telling the players where the servers, the dedicated servers that they were playing on, were from. So if there was a team playing from Texas and a team playing from LA, they might have had a server from Florida, which obviously, if you know your geography, would be probably pretty unfair and tilted towards the Dallas side, because they're a lot closer to that server than obviously California is. So this is something they need to get dedicated servers that are more clearly in between, or just better and not 12 hertz. Those have to go. The other thing is, how can we count championships this year? I know people have been questioning how to count the CDL championship, since there's only 8 teams at a tournament. The group play is weird. It's single elim. You only have to win like 4 series in order to win an entire tournament, which is usually how much you'd have to win to get a group play almost. Now I'm wondering how we can count these championships from the online setting. I'm wondering if you guys could offer any insight on that. I'd love to know in the comments below what you think. I think they, just like everything in this first year with the lack of teams, I think we'll get a lot of expansion teams to make the tournaments a lot more interesting, and maybe they'll change up the format, include more open style tournaments like we used to have. But I think we've got to almost at least count them, because they are winning a championship still. I think we have to maybe put an asterisk by them, mark that they were online or something, because online from LAN is a whole different animal. Just, they have to still be somewhat counted, but in a way they also have to be displayed that they were online and noted that they were online, and kind of put a little bit of an asterisk next to them. So that's everything I wanted to cover in this episode. I believe we cut it a little shorter than we normally do. Yeah, it's at about 30 something minutes right now. Yeah, that's about all I have. We went over the power rankings, the overall results from the weekend, talked to you about why I wasn't able to get a prediction show out for Dallas. I will definitely be getting one out for the Chicago event. It's kind of weird to call it the Chicago event since they're all online now, but that would be the next one, so they're calling it the Chicago homestand. Talked about some of the rumors we're hearing, some of my takeaways, put some respect on the talent team and the broadcast team, give them some slack. I know the broadcast wasn't as high quality as we all wanted to, but you know what? These people are trying their best. People like to say, oh, like whatever, how many $1 million league, they should be better, but cut them some slack. It's a tough job they have. They're all working from home. They can't go to a studio like they normally can. They're not used to casting online. I think they delivered us a pretty darn good product for what we could expect given the horrible circumstances. And I think we just need to be thankful that we have the CDL in this time to keep us entertained. I mean, most people, their sports are canceled. A lot of people are losing jobs. These people are all able to keep their job and keep us entertained. It's something that we need to be thankful for. And I'm thankful I still get to watch it. Something entertaining. All sports are gone. It's something entertaining for me to watch. I'm thankful it's still here, even though maybe the results aren't as consistent or high quality since it's not on LAN. We should just be thankful for it. And I want to thank you guys for tuning into this podcast. The support on the first 2 has been awesome, and I want to thank you for engaging in the comments. And it's been awesome to see some of you guys talking to me in the comments on your thoughts. If you want to comment down below any of your thoughts on my power rankings, if yours differ, or if some of my bold predictions you thought were wrong and you had a different opinion on it, if we can have a respectful conversation in the comments, that'd be awesome. I'd love to have some conversations with some of you guys. Tune in next week for I believe it'll come out probably next Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, somewhere in that week before the Friday Chicago homestand starts. So stay tuned for the predictions for that Chicago homestand next week, and stay safe, stay inside, keep social distancing. Hopefully you guys can stay safe, play some COD, play some whatever you're playing, and thank you for listening, and I will see you in the next one.